Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. Great to have you all with us once again. I have to say this, Benjamin Netanyahu may be one of the shrewdest politicians on the face of the earth. He appointed far-right Naftali Bennett Minister of Defense just after he launched an air attack that killed Baha al-Atla, who is the leader of Islamic Jihad, we think, in Gaza, along with his wife, Asma. That kept Bennett with him politically, which was a move on his part. And then it turned out that Atla was really not that much of a leader at all, some people write. And then he bombed the offices of Islamic Jihad in Damascus, and then launched a bombing campaign on Gaza after the Islamic Jihad launched an ineffectual rocket assault on Israel. The attack in Gaza killed 32 Palestinians, including 11 children, and another 111 people were wounded. Okay, so that doesn't make him brilliant, but his next steps politically inside of Israel that seem to be part of his grand strategy after all is and was brilliant. And here is where his brilliant manipulation and strategic thinking begins to keep himself in power. To help us figure all that out, we're about to talk with Jeff Halper. Jeff Halper joins us once again. He's an anthropologist, former head of the Israeli Committee Against Housing Demolitions. And his latest book is War Amongst the People, Israel, the Palestinians, and Global Pacification. And is currently involved with the People Yes Network, which promotes strategic coordination among left groups globally. And Jeff, welcome back. Good to have you with us.
Good to be back.
Always good to talk to you. So, I mean, I meant what I said at the very top here. I mean, whatever you think about Netanyahu and his politics and what he represents, the man is really brilliant and he knows how to stay in power. So
That's right.
So here he has his opposition, Benny Gantz, who might have won a few more votes than he has. He has a week to set up the government. So paint this story for us at this moment about what Netanyahu is doing to set himself up so he doesn't go to jail and can stay in power.
Well, that's all the manipulations, of course. And so Gaza and the Palestinians, as usual, are simply the vehicles for Netanyahu's political campaigns, essentially. The people of Gaza and Hamas and Islamic Jihad do not pose an existential threat to Israel. And for years and years, they've tried even to get into some kind of a peace agreement with Israel. They even agreed to the two-state solution years ago. It was called the prisoner's document. But we're talking about a situation of controlled violence that serves Netanyahu and Israel in different ways. Controlled violence, of course, it continues the pretext of keeping the occupation going and not making peace because they're always attacking us, so we always have to defend ourselves. Controlled violence also, of course, blames the victim so that we can't be held accountable for anything, and they're to blame, and that gives us a free rein to do anything we want to in the occupied territories or politically. It also keeps the laboratory going, because don't forget, Israel tests all kinds of new weapon systems, security systems, surveillance systems, drones in particular, in Gaza. Gaza is like a little laboratory, which is part of a larger West Bank laboratory. So for all those reasons, of course, Gaza is very useful for Israel. But in terms of internal politics, it's also useful because, again, it can be turned on and turned off according to the needs of Netanyahu. So now that he's in this competition with Gantz, he's trying to create a situation in which, and he's said this many times, the security situation is such that we can't afford a new government. And certainly, this is a subtext, a very important subtext, certainly not a government that would rely on the Arabs in Israel. Because any government that Gantz would set up would have to have the support, at least ask the support, of the joint Arab list. And so by demonizing the Arabs, and of course by creating this conflict in Gaza, what Netanyahu is doing is saying, what, you're going to have Arabs in the government at a time where there are enemies fighting us in Gaza? And creating an absolutely impossible situation for Gantz. So there's all kinds of layered levels. You're absolutely right. He is a brilliant tactician.
And taking it a step further, I mean, so let's take two parts here. A, what just happened in Gaza? I mean, 32 people were killed, many of them innocents. I mean, the father driving up on his motorcycle, and the visuals were put out by some of the Middle Eastern Arab media, driving up to his house. He's blown up. His two kids were blown up with him when he was just coming home to say hello to his kids. And it was a pretty horrendous attack that took place in Gaza with many innocent people killed, 111 people wounded. So that in itself creates this kind of terror inside of Gaza, with Hamas, it seems, just staying, we're out of this, we're not part of this. So he's neutralized them, but now it seems inside of Israel, to explain this to us, I mean, Benny Gantz was going to form a coalition with Avigdor Lieberman on the right, from the Russian group on the right, the Russian Jews on the right. And then he had the joint list on the left saying at least he would be passively support them, but not if he supports Gaza. So the Gaza incursions, which means that that was something else that Netanyahu must have planned ahead of time, knowing that that could split that coalition as well to make it even more difficult for Gantz to form a government. Am I right or wrong about that?
Well, yeah, it could be a little bit too.
Yeah, parse it out for us. Go ahead.
But not far off. There's nothing here that's by chance.
Right.
In other words, it's in the press in Israel that Abu al-Alata was scheduled to be assassinated 2 years ago. In other words, the approval went through the Israeli government and the military 2 years ago. So the timing was left to Netanyahu. You see, so in other words, for different reasons, they might want to get rid of him, but certainly it was very convenient to get rid of him, particularly at this time, when the negotiations are so keen, and you want to make it impossible for Gantz to link up to the Arabs in Israel. The Arabs in Israel are being portrayed by Netanyahu not as Israeli citizens, but as the enemy. I mean, there's no difference in Netanyahu speaking between Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, and Ayman Oda from the Joint Arab List, or Ahmed Tibi. And so I think the timing can't be ignored, of course, for this. But don't forget also, this isn't an isolated incident. We've been talking now about a year and a half or more, what's called the March of Return in Gaza. There have been almost 400 Palestinians killed and more than 3,600 Palestinians wounded, in very crippled in many cases in Gaza. So in other words, this is all part of the controlled violence. It's controlled politically. It's controlled in terms of managing Gaza. And it's also controlled in terms of Netanyahu's immediate political needs.
And then didn't he also kind of bring in one of the leaders of the joint list and kind of set him up in a conversation that he released? Wasn't that part of his way of getting in between Gantz and potentially building a coalition?
Yeah. I mean, look, let me put it this way. Yes. Yeah. But, Netanyahu really is brilliant. But let me introduce another thought to this whole thing. And that is that I think for everything else, I think he's finished politically, Netanyahu.
You think he's finished?
I believe he is going to be indicted, I think. And even if not, people are tired of him. Even in the Likud, they're tired of him. Gidon Saar and other people in the Likud are already beginning to challenge him. So he's finished. Now, what is true, we have to keep this in mind, is he is a brilliant manipulator. His English is great. He knows everybody, from Modi to the Chinese to Bolsonaro to Trump to everybody. And he's set up very important right-wing coalitions in the world. He's got a big plan, a big strategy, and he's managed to keep this whole thing together all these years, because the occupation is not very popular in the world. But he's managed to hold it all together. The next guy that comes in, whether it's Gantz or Gidon Saar, who's going to probably take over the Likud after Netanyahu, or anybody else, is not going to have those skills. His English isn't going to be so good. He'll be a local Israeli politician. He won't know anybody else. He won't really care that much about the world. And I think, in a way, after Netanyahu, this whole thing could start to unravel. And I'm looking forward to all kinds of cracks and opportunities to change things when he's gone. Because he really is, you're right, he really is a brilliant manipulator.
It's amazing. I was going to show this at the very top, and I meant to do that, but let me show it now. This is just to conclude with what he did in Gaza. This is his his conference when he talked about what he was about to do. Let's look at just for a moment. I want a quick thought from you on this.
In the past year, this arch-terrorist was the main generator of terrorism from the Strip. He initiated, planned and carried out many attacks. He fired hundreds of rockets at communities in the Gaza periphery, whose suffering we haven't ignored. He was in the midst of plotting additional attacks these very days. He was a ticking bomb.
So I meant to show this at the top, and I apologize, but this, because even this afterwards was shown a ticking bomb. So he's killing somebody because what he might do. And everything I've read in the European press and other press is that this guy wasn't that big a deal to start with.
Right.
I mean, so that's his manipulation started there and ended with how you were describing what he was doing inside of Israel proper.
Look, on the one hand, he's been ticking for 2 years now.
You're right.
So, I mean, how long do you tick? Again, they approved his killing 2 years ago. So, you have to look at that timing as well. But in addition, what of course is missing from the whole discussion is any kind of political horizon. And this is the conflict management part that the international community participates in and allows. And that is that everything is reduced to they're terrorists, they're throwing missiles, and in a sense, they have a right to resist. Nobody talks about occupation. That word is never, ever, ever used in it, and very seldom internationally these days. You talk about 50 years of occupation. You talk about 20 years of more than 10 years, 15 years of a siege, impoverishment. The UN says Gaza is going to be uninhabitable next year already. There's no water to drink. There's no employment. Israel's destroyed the infrastructure several times, killed thousands and thousands of people. So, in this situation, in a way, this particular attack might have a certain strategic and tactical meaning for Netanyahu, but put in the wider context, we have to understand that this is a violent state terrorism against the Palestinian people that's been going on now for more than 50 years in the occupied territory, and more than 125 years in the entire country. So we have to always put these things within the wider political perspective and understand that Hamas, Islamic Jihad, together with all the other Palestinian factions, agreed years ago to a two-state solution, which is really a very pro-Israel solution. They've tried to sue for peace, and Israel has always said no. And so we have to what Netanyahu tries to do is use these attacks to blame the victim, to make the Palestinians into the terrorists attacking us. And we lose the whole bigger picture of Israel's attacks, of besiegements, of occupation, of settler colonialism, and the fact that we're talking about Palestinian resistance. We're not talking about Palestinian attacks on Israel. And so I think we have to keep that wider context all the time in front of us.
Well, Jeff Halper, as this unfolds, when we see what happens with Netanyahu and the indictment, and whether Gantz takes over or someone else takes over for Netanyahu, we'll come back to you to see what this all is. Thank you for the work you do, and thanks for joining us once again today here in The Real News. Always good to talk to you, Jeff. And I'm Mark Steiner here for The Real News Network. Thank you all for joining us. Let us know what you think. Take care.
Hey y'all, my name is Tharna Noor and I'm a climate crisis reporter here at The Real News Network. This is a crucial moment for humanity and for the planet. So if you like what we do, please support us by subscribing at the link below. Thank you.